Yeah, lung scarring. Ugh, that's sorry to hear that. Not fun. What item is up first? Bird scooters, that's right.
Yes.
Then legacy, then,
Yes, birds
okay.
aren't real.
Why did I looked at the wrong thing.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 5:32, and I will call this regular city council work session to order. Our work sessions are informal, and we go directly to our agenda items. And the first item on our agenda is the Bird e-scooters. And our city engineer, Jen Desirut, is going to introduce the item and introduce our guest.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So Regina, Dean, and I were approached by a representative from Bird Scooter, and he had requested an audience with the council to just talk about their product and how it could potentially be implemented in Burnsville. So I think he is on Zoom.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Again.
Excellent, excellent. And council, thank you for inviting me to further inform you on what bringing a Bird's micromobility via the electric scooter to Burnsville would look like. I put together a little educational deck that's going to go over a high-level overview of what the program looks like, what day-to-day operations will be. We'll actually be partnering with a local entrepreneur who lives in Burnsville. This is someone who lives in your community, an entrepreneur. This person does have to be mechanically savvy as well, but you can kind of think of them as a third-party logistics operator. It will all be Bird brand, Bird company, Bird scooters. They're trained by Bird, the Bird app, but we do have a local individual who gives that local feel, who knows the community, who will be actually putting the scooters out every day, proactively managing them throughout the day, and they'll actually be the ones performing those repairs and maintenances as well. They're invested in the success of this program as they are forming a small corporation to run this small scooter business through. Their take home will be all based on ride revenue percentage, so they're invested in the success of this program as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll really jump into what kind of levers can you pull, what's the customizations that the administration wants to see to make sure that this program is, one, successful, but two, also exactly what you guys want it to be. So with that being said, my name is Garrett Gronowski. I'm a senior account executive here at Bird. I've been with the company for 4.5 years of the 5 years that Bird actually pioneered the e-scooter micromobility space back in 2017 in Santa Monica. So I've been implementing micromobility programs at the city level, the university level, for about as long as you can in this industry. So really here as a resource to, again, further educate you what this program and implementation would look like and if it would be a good fit for Burnsville.
So I think we need to pull up the slide deck, and then we can proceed through it.
Okay.
For people in the, there it is, okay. And Garrett, can you see the slide deck on your screen?
Yep, that's
Okay.
great.
All right.
So what Bird, we're ultimately seeking approval to bring our Bird operations. What those Bird operations would be a fleet of dockless shared electric scooter to act as a micromobility service, an added layer of transportation to your existing network to help with connectivity, first and last mile transportation needs. Obviously the sustainability aspect speaks for itself, but really just improving overall quality of life. What Bird does is really helps with that sporadic spending. Obviously, 65% of these rides end with a definite destination. So that means individuals connecting with more businesses, more restaurants, but also means 35% of these are used as an amenity. There is still a sense of fun when you're riding these electric scooters, but 65% of these rides are at a definite destination. The University of Emory out of Atlanta, Georgia, just released a study that one Bird e-scooter translates to about $2,000 in sporadic spend over a year. But what Bird is, we pioneered this space 5 years ago with the ultimate goal to eliminate unnecessary car trips. We truly believe that anything under 3 miles is considered an unnecessary car trip and can be supplemented by a more sustainable form of transportation. That's when you insert our vehicle, the electric scooter. And like I said, you're gonna hear me say the word connectivity a lot. In these middle-sized markets, under 100,000, not the large metropolitan ones, that's really what we're providing here. Again, additional transportation network to help the community connect with the community. You can go to the next slide. You can actually skip this one. Just a little history on Bird. We did pioneer this space back in 2017. I joined the company quickly after beginning of 2018. When I first joined, we were only in 2 markets in the whole world. Fast forward 5 years, we're now in 350 cities, over 100 million rides. We are a publicly traded company. So really what that speaks on is you are reaping the benefits of us being able to partner with cities and universities and hearing their feedback for 5 years, where now we know exactly what cities are looking for. Our vehicles are built for those solutions, and we have a really good pulse on how to run day-to-day operations. Next slide. Cities big and small. You might have seen or heard of Bird operating those larger metropolitan cities, the Minneapolises of the world. That's no longer the case. We really want to provide micromobility to communities that find value in it. So with that, when COVID hit in 2020, the pandemic, we kind of shifted our business model and we took a step back and we're like, how can we provide this service to more communities across the country? And that's how we've localized operations. So like I said, we partner with someone who lives in Burnsville to help us run those day-to-day operations, and that allowed us to expand our reach. We're now operating in about 200 cities across the country from, I think our smallest one, as you see on there, was about 7,000 in Kansas. And we run this micro fleet manager, we call it a fleet manager model, to all the way about to 125,000 city population. Next slide. How it works is you would download the Bird app. I do highly recommend anyone to download the Bird app just to see the UI, how it works. You do sign a user agreement. You do have to be 18 years or older to rent and to ride a Bird scooter. You add a payment method. This can be a credit card, debit card, prepaid Visa. And then you get put into these educational tutorials. I like to call this the tip of the iceberg when it comes to education, because this is just your first interaction with it. So this is before you can even get on your first Bird scooter, and these are customizable by what Burnsville wants messaging to get across to the community. So we obviously have templates for you, but you kind of pick like, okay, no sidewalk riding or no parking on the grass. So you can always pick and choose which messaging you want to get across. But really, this is just going to go through what are the rules, the regulation, the scooter etiquette, as you may when riding a Bird scooter in Burnsville. These are interactive, they're animated, they're fun, but you also do have to complete them before getting onto your first Bird ride. Excuse me. After you go through those tutorials, you'd come to the home screen. The home screen would be a map of Burnsville. The city limits would be the operating zone. So that was where the Birds can go and be available. So we are a dockless model. So no additional infrastructure needs to be implemented in the community. We love to use biking infrastructure. So a lot of communities, upload their bike racks as parking spots in the community. But again, we are a dockless model. Number one rule is just to park out of the pedestrian right away. To end your ride, you do have to take a photo of your Bird. This kind of allows us to, hey, you got an A-OK parking spot, allows us to apply incentives for good parking locations, but also allows us to subject the rider for a fine for a bad parking location as well. The available Birds to rent and to ride would be indicated by these Bird icons right here. They'd be parked sporadically throughout the community. Each and every morning, that local fleet manager is going to strategically place them in the high demand areas that best serve the community. And then the rides start to happen from there, and the scooters organically move throughout the community from there. You can go to the next slide. Pricing, it's $1 to unlock. So every ride you scan the QR code that starts your rental period. This is a short-term rental solution. Average time being spent on a bird scooter is 10 to 20 minutes. Average distance about 1.5 miles to 3 miles. So it's $1 to unlock, and then a per minute fee after that. The per minute fee is regional, it's seasonal, so anywhere from like 35 cents to 55 cents is kind of what we're seeing right now domestically. We do view ourselves as a public transportation outlet. We view ourselves as being affordable and available for all. So if we do have equitable pricing options available for those in government assistance programs, they can get discounts, or we can waive the unlock fee for them, veterans, senior citizens, healthcare workers, groups like that. Next slide, please. Great rule of thumb with the dockless model is they go where bikes go. So where you see bikes today in your community is where you'll see e-scooters. They follow the same rules of the road. The only difference is, obviously, this is a dockless model. So you have the freedom to pick up and drop off where you want, as long as, again, it's out of the pedestrian right away. We can recommend and incentivize riders to park in certain locations. As I said, we can upload GPS coordinates of bike racks, or if you just have, the great thing about the dockless model, you don't need the infrastructure there. So, if you have an area where not a lot of pedestrians are going, but it's out of the way, great parking location, you just send us those GPS coordinates and we can upload those into the app with a preferred parking location. The preferred parking locations, it'd be like a parking garage P. You can click on it. It would give you directions to that location. It'd give you an address to the location. It would give you a photo just like this, like how you should be parking. Once you get into that location, the scooter will recognize that it's in that, give you a check mark, and you've earned a discount for your next ride. Next slide. This is a no-cost micromobility solution to the city. So ultimately, like I said, we are looking for approval, the execution of the memorandum of understanding that was sent over, allowing us to run operations in Burnsville. Obviously, with the execution of the agreement, this also allows us to indemnify the city. So that's transfer of liability, everything Bird, from the city of Burnsville over to Bird, as long as there's no gross negligence. Next slide. The administration does get a city account manager. This is a true liaison between everyone in Burnsville and Bird. This person is there for questions, concerns, words of wisdom, help you grow the program, share data, strategically plan operations, a special event planning. We can, set up special zones if there's a big parade or a concert or anything like that. You'll have one point of contact for all things Bird. Next slide. This would be the physical scooter itself. Top speed is 18 miles per hour. The average distance on a fully charged Bird is 35 miles. This has a 3 braking system. There's 2 handbrakes and a brake in the motor. The wheels have a self-sealing wheel, so if you do run over something and a little hole gets in it, a liquid actually gets released, so it self-seals so that rider can get there safely. This is really the latest and greatest in the e-scooter world. Obviously, you have all the specs there, so please let me know if you have any additional questions on the vehicle itself. Next slide. These are really the customizations, the levers that the city can pull to communicate with the scooters in real time. There's 3 functionalities inside the operating zone that the community has access to. The operating zone, again, will be the city limits, and the Birds can go wherever. You can implement 3 things to kind of talk to these birds while they're operating in these operating zones. The first one is a no ride zone. I like to call this a dismount zone. This would be indicated like you see right here with a red layer of GPS. You just have to tell us where you maybe have an area where you don't allow bicycles or skateboards in your community. Well, we know that's going to be a no ride zone where the birds cannot go into. So we put this layer of GPS in there. And as soon as the scooter hits that area, it communicates with the bird that it's a no ride zone, and the motor would shut off. So top speed is 0 miles per hour. We don't lock the wheels for safety concerns, but the motor would not work. So I like to call it a dismount zone, because at that time, the rider would have to dismount the scooter and push it through. A lot of times when we implement these no ride zones, the rider does end their ride. So some strategic planning there is we put a no ride zone, let's also put some preferred parking areas around it. The second one is a slow zone. This is really anything under top speed. So high pedestrian areas, construction zones. Again, these zones can be temporary or permanent. So, they can be implemented for just a weekend event, or they can always be in the operating zone as well. The last one that is not pictured here is a no park zone. This is an area where you can utilize a bird scooter through, but could not physically end your ride. If you tried to end your ride, you would receive an error message saying you're in a no park zone. You would continue to be charged for that ride. Sorry, my dogs are scratching at the door. Next slide, please. This is how we really focus on reducing clutter. We've talked about the first three already. Like anything new in a community, you have to educate the community, educate the riders. That starts from that internal funnel of when you're signing up in those interactive tutorials. And then these riders get put into email campaigns, in-app messaging. We want this to be a strategic partnership, so doing a joint press release to, one, create some buzz and excitement around this new form of transportation, but again, educate them on what are the rules and regulations within the community. Then we layer on those desired behaviors. So if we tell the community that you can't ride birds in a certain park, then we layer on that no ride zone, the layer of GPS that communicates with the scooter. So we tell them, and then the action within the operating zone doesn't allow it, then they get the full message. The local presence, I think, is the biggest difference, between those larger metropolitan cities and this micro fleet. We would be starting you guys out with 50 scooters and growing the fleet based on utilization there. We like to start small, make sure we run really strategic operations, and then grow it from there. For the local operations, this individual will be proactively managing the scooters. So throughout the day, they're going around moving scooters from low demand areas back to high demand areas. Again, they're investing in the success of this program as they're getting paid when the rides are in action. To make the space, that's the implementation of the preferred parking area. So where we recommend them to park the bird scooters. And then of course, leveraging data. We're a data company at our core. Sorry. So the longer we run operations, the better we get at it. We get more data points. We can proactively plan for, high demand and ride areas, where rides starting mostly. So we can strategically place them to best serve the community there. And we use this on the back end with that local fleet manager to help them strategically run operations. Next slide. This would be that local entrepreneur. We love recommendations from the administration. If you know someone who's mechanically savvy, has an entrepreneurial spirit, maybe wants to expand their book of business, but we'll also do a bunch of job postings. We have an internal team that then interviews, selects the strongest candidates. We usually take about 3 candidates and put them through a 2-week training, and whoever is the strongest candidate gets rewarded the bid at that time. And this individual will have a warehouse of some sort. So charging and maintaining is done behind closed doors. So obviously we utilize the public space to park the bird scooters throughout the day. But when, if a scooter is damaged and needs to get repaired or needs to be charged up, that is behind closed doors, roof over their head. Obviously, we're also a seasonal business, so we would be utilizing birds in Burnsville through the spring, summer, and fall months. In those winter months, we hibernate the birds. There's a lot of bird puns when you work with us, but we just put them in storage. Next slide. Customer service. We want the community to interact with all things bird through us. We don't want to add any more onto the public works or police department's plates. So there is a phone number and email address on every single vehicle where even if you don't have the Bird app, you can interact with us, give us constructive criticism, tell us stuff we're doing right, tell us stuff we're doing wrong as well. So there's a phone number and email address. A way better resource is in the app. So we're gonna really urge all community members to download the Bird app, even if you don't plan on, utilizing it every day. But you can utilize community mode for free. That's in app. It's a reporting self-policing tool. What's really, really cool about community mode is when you report it, it creates an internal ticket and sends it to the bird team. We can reach out to that rider for an educational touch point because we know who was last associated with that bird. Obviously, multiple repeat offenders can be suspended from the app or subject to fines as well. But I think the coolest thing about this community mode, it also sends a text message to that local fleet manager and triggers a timely response. So, you see a badly parked bird, a bird that we're in an area that's not supposed to, all you do is take a picture of it. That will be reported to the local fleet manager. They respond within 90 minutes and move that bird. Next slide. You can skip this one too. And that's the high-level overview for educational deck. So I want to just open up for any additional questions or concerns.
Okay. Questions? Chief, do you have any questions?
Do you guys want to ask questions first? Otherwise, I just have a few things that I wanted to just mention. I had some questions. I think it's an interesting idea if everyone were to actually follow the rules and do the things that they're supposed to do. I can see how communities could enjoy that. Some concerns I have is just, juveniles are supposed to be wearing helmets when they do this. They're only supposed to be riding with one passenger, and I know from a neighboring community in Dakota County who's just trying this out, they've definitely seen violations of both of those things, which is a concern. Also, how do we verify if they're 18 years when they get on this app? I would imagine there's a lot of fake birthdays and things like that put in, so we really don't know, just something to be concerned about there. It always is
just if I can
concerning
speak
when
on that really
more-
quickly. So in the state of Minnesota, helmets are
Can you
not
hear us?
mandatory to operate bird scooters. Obviously, we want everyone to have availability to birds. So we actually, bird scooters or helmets, that is. So we actually provide free helmets within the app. All you have to do is pay for shipping and handling. It's $4.99. And then obviously we'll ship that helmet out to you. But just wanted to make sure that that was clear that if you're 18 or older, which you have to operate bird scooters, it's not mandatory to have the helmet on.
So just, and then also just having more people on motorized vehicles on the roadways is always just a concern. I would imagine, and I know I've heard that they don't necessarily stay on the roadways, so then you have people on sidewalks, and then you can have collisions. That would be something to consider. And then just staging these, or where would they go? Where would 50 of these go? So some questions that way. And then I think it is resources, it is time for, it's great if someone's gonna call the number in the app, but also it's probably easier to just pick up the phone and call 911 or call the scooter's left in my yard, or some things like that. I get concerned about the geofencing because I also know that's probably works to some degree, but then I know a city that has a historic area where they try to block that off, and it's still people are still seen cruising around in those areas. So, and then it's just the enforcement of it. So then what are we going to be enforcing? And then the difficulty enforcing it when people are mobile on scooters, and then just festivals in summertime, just a lot of people in those areas, depending on where the scooters would be, just be something to consider. And then just the collisions, and then the staff time for us, or communications, or to make sure, we're, getting the buzz out there and all that. That requires a lot of work. And I know there are people that will follow the rules, and it would be great if everybody did in a perfect world. But the reality is, as it translates to actual day to day, it can get to be just extra time and resources. So that would be something I would just be concerned about.
Okay. Mr. Gronowski, have you experienced some of the concerns that our chief of police is identifying? Because some of her concerns are mine. We're,
It's different than
it's
bikes.
the helmets. We make sure that they wear helmets. But now you're saying that they can, you can send it to them. But what if they're going to want to ride, but they don't have a helmet? Who's
They're allowed
enforcing
to
that?
ride by state law without a helmet on a bird scooter. If you're 18 years older, and you have to be 18 years or older to rent and ride a bird scooter. But yeah, I absolutely hear the chief of police and obviously our experience. If I was to say that the police would get 0 calls regarding bird scooters when we drop them, that would be a lie. It's just all about educating the community to use the resources at their hand. Hey, if you have a question about bird, these resources are available. Obviously, you have that city account manager to really help you with that. The geofence technology has come a very long way in the past 5 years. It is instantaneous now. With that Bird 3 scooter that was pictured, the map of the operating zone is actually in the bird brain within the scooter, so it doesn't even need to communicate with the cloud. So as soon as it hits it, it's milliseconds of that area actually working. So we have come a long way to fix that problem. I mean, 3-4 years ago, you're absolutely correct that, you would hit the geofence and you could still go for another 20 yards, but that's no longer the case. And then, yeah, of course, everything is education when something is new in this transportation. And again, we want to incentivize and discount that good behavior and then get rid of those bad apples.
Yeah, but they can be left anywhere in the city. I mean, they could be left on someone's yard, they could be left on a path, they could be left someplace where someone else could collide with them. So there is the parking areas, it's all about education, I get that. But those would just be that's concerning to me, and someone getting injured or not seeing it, it's laying around someplace, or someone's calling because why are these scooters laying in my yard, or things like that. Or I know sometimes other cities that don't have this, there aren't very many around us in this particular Dakota County, but where a scooter will come from another, they'll just find it in their cities. So people, I don't know how they leave the city or if that's another thing with geo fencing, but they will find them in their cities too. So it's just, yes, if people follow the rules, I get it. And it's just a lot of education, so it's staff time is all I'm saying.
And Mr. Gronowski, I know I've experienced some of these scooters when I'm in Washington, D.C. and other cities where scooters are allowable, and people leave them on the sidewalk, and now you've got a piece of equipment on the sidewalk. Now, you're telling us that with the app, it will communicate with the rider that they're in a no parking zone.
We do park on the sidewalk, so we utilize that furniture loading zone. So, next to street signs, street lamps, trash cans, bike racks, anywhere out of the pedestrian right of way that is public property is where we'll be utilizing to stage and park these as well. Obviously, in Washington, D.C., I think they have about 6,000 scooters. Again, we're starting you with 50, so it's kind of hard to compare apples to oranges when you go day-to-day operations there. We do have that localized fleet manager as well, who's going to be proactively managing these scooters, making sure they're in great parking locations, making sure they're in great high demand areas that best serve the community as well. So one, the pure quantity of obviously comparing Burnsville to Washington, D.C. operations are very, very different. And that's why we start so small and then grow it from there.
Any other questions? Comments? Yes, Councilmember Gustafson.
What are some of the biggest issues that you encounter as you're deploying these around the cities?
Yeah, I think the chiefs of police have really nailed it on the head. You're going to have those bad behaviors where they're not going to listen to the rules and regulations, but that's really with anything when it comes to driving a car or a bicycle or a motorcycle. So one, it was the clutter where, they're not parking or they are blocking the pedestrian right away. And that's why we've put in so many resources and dedicated so much time to improving those solutions. And I think that localized fleet manager has been the biggest change in that, and the proactive management. They are getting multiple touch points on these scooters throughout each and every day. And then I cannot underestimate the resources in the app. Of course, I know we have to get the people to download the app to have resources at community mode, but it is such a great resource to utilize to help improve day-to-day operations.
Any other comments? Councilmember Key.
Can you speak to the?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, yours is working. Yours is working.
That one's working.
Can you speak to the industry growth how many, over the last, let's say, 5 years, how many cities that scooters in general, and I'm sure you can only speak for your own company, but the industry stats are probably fairly widely known for the growth of your competitors. So just as a whole, how many cities are added every year with some sort of scooter program?
Yeah, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. We, as Bird, operate in over 350 cities globally. Obviously, I cannot speak to my competitors. Obviously, competition is really healthy, especially when there is an industry where, micromobility is here to stay. Sustainability is here to stay. So more and more players, and obviously the Ubers, the Lyfts, the Limes, the Birds, those are the big players and big names, but there's also more companies popping up that are local and smaller and just regional as well. So the industry has boomed, and obviously we went from being the pioneer of this space and became a publicly traded company in less than 5 years. So the industry growth has been phenomenal.
Thank you. Well, one follow-up.
Yep.
Have you had any cities test it and then pull the plug on the program?
We have not had a pilot operating agreement go and then the city decide not to move forward. We have had to pull out of a couple cities that were much, much smaller than you because utilization wasn't as where we expected it to be. But I'm talking about these cities were less than 10,000 city population. So the great thing about the scooters is supply creates demand. Obviously, there's no demand because you don't have e-scooters. You put them on the streets and people utilize them, whether it's for the practical aspect of it or just for a leisure and amenity aspect in the Burnsville. So that is a great way to go. Is we especially with being a seasonal business, we could run a pilot operating agreement to the winter time, look back at success. What does utilization look like? What are the areas of concern? What are areas for growth? And then in those off months, really put our heads together and come together with a go forward plan.
One last follow-up. What's the data tell us on the percentage of scooters in your fleet and the number of accidents or injuries that are reported when a person is riding, and how does that compare to people riding bicycles?
There's been multiple case studies done by large cities. First one coming to my mind is Portland. That is showing statistics that scooters are actually safer than bicycles. You will have access to incident reports and safety reports through your data dashboard that you get access to. Also in that city data dashboard, you'll be able to see where the birds are at in real time based on GPS pinging. You'll be able to see where rides are starting, where rides are ending. You can export rider data. So rider X went from point A to point B and took this route. So it really helps for strategic planning and really gives you a very transparent view on where and how the community is utilizing this form of transportation.
Thank you.
What communities around the Twin Cities areas are you in, and how long have you been in those communities? What I would like to do is for us to have contact with the police chief of those communities and to get their perspective of how this is working.
Yeah, we launched this middle-sized to smaller market again in 2021. So I don't have a list. I can send over a list of all of our other Minnesota communities, but I can also just quickly go through them. St. Louis Park, Minnesota since April of this year. Grand Rapids, Minnesota since April of this year. Golden Valley, April of this year. Austin, Minnesota, April of this year. Albert Lea, March. Duluth, April. Albert Lea was actually in August of 2021. Hastings, Minnesota, launched in March. Bloomington, Minnesota, last year. Two Harbors last year. Hopkins was this year. And
And how is that working?
We are still operating in all of those markets.
Okay, so in Hopkins, Golden Valley, I'm just thinking of those cities around the Twin Cities area that you've identified.
Yeah, and
Yes, Jen.
again, I'll send over a list of these, and the ones that you want contact information from, I can get you over who's our main point of contact for them.
So
Jen?
I have the list he was talking about, and I can distribute that as well.
Yeah, I just want to understand their experience,
Yeah, absolutely.
because that gives us some insight into what our experience might be. And the other thing is that I want to find out from the chief in those cities, how much staff that you have to utilize for all of that. Yeah, because they're going to call 911, and we're going to get calls when they're leaving the scooters in somebody's yard or something like that. So I want to understand what's the cost effect to us, because when I listen to you, Mr. Gronowski, you're saying that you're trying to make it so that all of the issues go to you and the account manager rather than to the city. But our
Yes,
experience
perfect
is
world.
that's not always the fact. Yeah, Kara.
I really don't have a problem with scooters coming. They're going to come. I mean, we can act like this is not going to happen, but it absolutely is. This is what people would like to have. People already privately own them. I own one. And no, I don't wear a helmet, but I'm also over 18. And it's also why every time we're talking about bike paths, why I have been insisting that we're not just talking about bike paths. That when we're talking about multimodal, it needs to actually mean that. Because we are going to see more and more of this in our city, just like every other city is. And so we need to also have our infrastructure be built to accommodate these types of things. But just like bicycles, we also can't wait. We can't just put everything on ice until then. I travel frequently. I see these types of things all over. Sometimes they appear to be managed well. Other times they do not appear to be managed well. It does sound like the processes that are put into place with this particular company sound like a good balance of trying to find ways to manage and incentivize good behavior and penalize bad behavior, such as if they're parking it in a crappy place, they can get a fine. That seems reasonable to me, and that seems incentivized to at least decrease the amount of people just junking them or leaving them wherever. So I really don't see a problem with this. I see this the same as self-checkout, and I see this the exact same as our recharging stations. This is just how things are going to move forward. So I really don't have a problem with this. And I am familiar, my family is in Austin, Minnesota, so I am familiar with this. I have seen this particular company in action. Really don't have a problem with it.
Councilmember Keeley, Dan, Kay.
I did find some accident data from 2021 May in DC. They did a study comparing accidents on e-scooters to bicycles. And the results were e-scooter incidents were less frequent in being involved in motor vehicles than bicycles, 13% versus 37%. That's really high for bicycles. Or that they occurred on roads, 24% versus 50% for cycling. Smaller portion of injured e-scooter riders were aged 30 to 49 The only one that was higher for bicyclists was 50 and older. Or higher for a scooter rider was a 50 and older. The one thing they do note is concussions, because only 2% of scooter riders are wearing helmets in their study, and 66% of bicyclists were wearing a helmet. There were higher incidences of concussions and loss of consciousness for a scooter accident. There is also studies, and I caught one in LA in a particular neighborhood where the numbers are inverted, and scooter accidents are a little higher than bicycles. So it probably depends on the city, density, population, usage, availability, how many trips and that kind of stuff. But I would agree with Councilmember Schultz. I don't have a problem with scooters. When we've been in other cities, I've ridden scooters. I enjoy it. I think it's an amenity. I've gotten around in San Diego riding scooters when I was at a convention there for a few years. We rode them while we were in D.C., and I'm pretty sure we were accident-free. I was, anyway.
No, Vince was not. Vince was not.
They have higher curbs.
I didn't say that. I was just, yeah, so you just, riding them at night is probably not ideal when you don't know the pavement that you're riding on or the sidewalks. But, it is a new thing. I think all the cities that adopted this probably had the same debate. Of course, after they were given a chance, because scooters really popped up and surprised a lot of the major cities without warning. But a lot has been learned. And I will say I'm very impressed with the technology that Bird has presented. They have learned a lot. I think the first scooter I rode was probably 5 or 6 years ago, or maybe 7 years ago, out in Los Angeles or San Diego. And a lot of the technology that Bird presented was not available back then. So significant. I mean, if you could ride it on anything, anywhere, any building, any sidewalk, any street. There was no, throttle back or cut off or anything, depending on area. So I think they've really employed some outstanding technology to allow us to give better controls if we were to allow this in our city. So I think it's good to come in later and let the other cities sort of feel the pain of beta testing and let us take advantage of what they learned and do something here. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah, Councilmember Workman.
Just to echo Councilmember Keeley's points, I've ridden several of these kinds, Lime and Bird, and I think there was one other. And now when we go to a different city and there's scooters, I'm usually looking for the Bird scooters. They have, at least in my experience, have been the best. And as I was looking at the Bird website, just to touch on Chief's point about age identification, it looks like they didn't have this when I last rode, but smart ID verification, it looks like you have to take a picture of your driver's license, and I would let Garrett maybe speak to that a little bit more in depth. And then part of the geofencing, again, this might have helped me. They have smart sidewalk protection, and I would assume they've got mapping down, and maybe, again, Garrett with Bird can speak to this a little bit more too, where it notifies you as you're approaching a sidewalk with a mobile or audible alert. The joke, why everybody's laughing, is because when I think we were in DC, and Dan and I were buzzing pretty quick down the road, and there was a curb there that I thought was lower than it was, and the Bird scooter stopped, but I didn't, and so, but that was a good lesson for me in that moment, and I would think now with the technology that's integrated into these scooters today compared to, I think that was 2019, that may have been avoided, but point being, if any company was going to come in and ask us about scooters, I'm glad that it was Bird, because I've had good experiences with them, and like I said, I look for them now if there's an opportunity or a need for one of these.
Dan G.
I have a question. Are you plan on deploying any ADA-type scooters? Like I noticed that there were some wheelchair-type birds and,
No, for right now, it would only be the two-wheeled standing scooters.
only the two-wheel?
Yes.
Thank you.
You know, I understand that all of these new innovations in transportation are all coming. I have no concern, but my concern is the safety of the community and whether we have the staffing capacity, because, and I'd like to have a little bit more information from the chiefs in the other cities like St. Louis Park and Hopkins and Golden Valley, I believe, some of those who have had it for a while, and to understand what their experience is so that we can learn from all of that. So I understand that you have better technology, but I think for us to be thoughtful about how we go about all of this and to understand the staffing capacity within our police department. Right now, we are at a big deficit, so I'd like to understand what the impact has been in other cities as we continue to move forward. So what I'm hearing, I don't know,
I
yeah,
didn't say one way or another. I was
yeah,
just
you
still
didn't,
asking
and so I'm
questions.
coming back to you, Dan G.
Actually, I like these kind of programs. I have a lot of the same concerns about them being left on sidewalks around town and that sort of thing, but I'm fortunate to be sitting next to Vince right now, who is really good at going on the internet and looking at things. And as I'm looking at this site, it's like, I think with their technology, they're solving a lot of these problems. And I don't know that it would hurt to try it for a season. If we don't like it, then we don't. I mean, again, we got to get back to who we are as a city and what we're trying to do here. And we're trying to attract people to our city to have things and have amenities. That's an amenity that they can get in a lot of different cities. And, you know, we have to take advantage of anything we can put in our arrow, we can put in our quiver too, to bring people in and have them do that. We have enough events going on in town here. I could see people riding scooters around to different events all the time around town. But it does concern me that these things could end up on sidewalks or on a corner on Nicollet and the Parkway or something like that.
Well, what I heard from from Garrett is that the scooters are designed so that they understand where it's going to be parked. Am I correct? And if it's not parked in the appropriate section, it notifies the rider. Am I correct?
Well, we are dockless, so they can be parked anywhere within the operating zone as long as they're not in the pedestrian right of way. Then they can be subject to penalties, but they can park them anywhere. I just want to make sure that's abundant.
They can park them anywhere?
Yes, they're a dockless model, so they don't need to be, but we can incentivize, we can create parking locations and give them directions and like, hey, if you're going to 5th and 2nd, there's a parking location here, you can earn a discount off your next ride if you park there. If they choose not to park there and, you know, they park out of the pedestrian right away somewhere else, that's still great. They just wouldn't receive that incentive.
Okay. Well, the memorandum of understanding says that the agreement can be terminated within 30 days.
Yep.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
You're going to have a person here in Burnsville that's going to manage this whole process, pick them up at night, I understand, to charge them in that. What about scooters that get in the way during the day that are in areas that are, will someone be around to go take care of that?
Yep, they will be proactively managing this fleet of bird scooters. This is a full-time job, especially in these seasonal businesses, so our seasonal territory. So we're only running operations spring, summer, and fall. That's where utilization is the highest. So this individual, whether it's one or maybe they bring on some employees, if there's enough scooters on the streets for them still to make enough money to do so. Yes, they'll be proactively managing, moving the birds around. So we call it rebalancing. That's moving low demand scooters to high demand areas. Again, we want these to be positioned in areas that best serve the community. So, you know, if someone does take it from the downtown area home and they're utilizing that last mile, you know, to get home and staying out of their car and they park it out of the pedestrian right away at home, but, you know, not a lot of ride starts happen there. that scooter would actually notify that fleet manager by a text message saying, hey, scooter XYZ is marked in a low demand area. Let's go ahead and reposition it to one of those predetermined parking spots.
Just a follow-up.
Okay, yeah.
Now, do I understand also this is to be used just during daylight hours, not in the evening when it's dark?
We view ourselves as public transportation. We want to be available for, those early morning commuters or people, coming home from a library, or those shift workers coming home from their late night shift. We do want to be available. So we usually run operations until about midnight, but obviously that is subject for discussion.
Then are there lights on these scooters then?
Yeah, automatic lights. So
Okay.
automatic headlights, brake lights, lights underneath the scooter as well. I know our newest scooter is actually going to have a light that shines onto the rider as well. So a lot of innovation around the lighting systems of these scooters.
Thank you.
All right, it appears that there is consensus before we adopt all of this and sign this agreement, I would like the chief to have conversations with some of those other chiefs I want to learn from those experiences so that we have a good experience for our citizens, not only the riders of the scooter, but the residents of this community and the businesses. If somebody drops a scooter, in somebody's yard or somebody's business, I want to make sure that they have a good experience as well. So, but I understand that there's consensus here. And then, of course, the chief can tell us, I know that you're in need of staffing. So what's that impact? After talking to the other chiefs and see what that impact is like for them. Okay. All right. Thank you for coming before us, Mr. Gronowski. I think our staff has the direction. And before we move forward with the signing of the agreement and getting it adopted, we need to just get some information from the other chiefs. At least I would like that. Yes.
Absolutely. And please use me as a
city
resource as you do
manager.
your due diligence, and let me know if you need anything from me or the Bird team. I'm really here just to assist you in helping making this decision.
Okay. Greg.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. We will take that direction and move forward. There was some conversation in the council about a pilot agreement rather than a general agreement. Just want to make sure that I have clear direction on whether the council would like to pilot this or would like to enter into an agreement as it's presented.
Just
Yeah,
to see if it works out.
that's
well
what
for the
I
city.
heard from Dan Kay. You talked about a pilot agreement.
I don't think I used those words, but that's fine. I don't have a problem with it.
Oh,
I think you made that up.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we have a pilot operating agreement available,
I-
obviously
yeah,
with the
I heard it
MOU,
too.
as you stated. Either party can, we can shake hands and leave if it's not
Maybe
working for
you
either or.
used it
So
in a
the MOU is
question.
not permanent
Pilot
regardless,
agreement.
but we do have a pilot operating agreement template as well if you
Yeah.
have.
Jen Ryan?
Yeah, so I think what Garrett was saying is that there's a 30-day opt-out. So
Yeah.
it essentially could
Cancel it
operate as
anytime
just
anyway, right.
a pilot agreement, and the city opts out or cancels it after 30 days.
Yeah, and that's what I saw, because the agreement says you can terminate within 30 days, so.
That's-
And also, there was a summary of a pilot operating agreement also in the background.
Okay, so I did send over both. Okay, that's where you got it from.
Yeah,
Madam Mayor, I said, my question was, were there any cities that did a pilot that
Pilot.
opted out? In other words, they didn't continue the
Yeah,
program.
yeah.
For whatever the reason, just want to
Yeah.
know how many they were losing of the people, of the
Yeah.
cities that they were signing up.
yeah, so the background also has a pilot operating agreement.
Yeah.
So, Jen?
So if the council is wanting to proceed, there are some city code updates that also need to be made. So it's not just signing the agreement, we need to make them legal as well. So there'll be a little bit of work on that end to get them to
And
be.
then, yeah,
And I would ask the council for some grace and space in that. There'll be communication, community education component of this as well. So I want to make sure that we're planned and kind of reasonable and expectations are clear, that I wouldn't expect these just to show up on the street. I think that we have some operational things to deal with before that would happen.
And
Absolutely.
To that point, Greg,
what's the timeline?
I would anticipate that there will be plenty of people not wanting these in their backyard. I think about Sunset Pond. I think they're struggling with electric scooters as it is now. So I think there would also need to be a discussion about where we want to redline that these could not go.
Like around Sunset Pond.
Because I'm getting emails about electric scooters going around there as it is today.
Yeah.
Councilmember Workman, I think that's a good point, and I'll turn to our city engineer and our public works department to kind of lead that effort, and it will be collaborative across city departments, and most likely this is not the first time that you all, or the last time, that you all will be talking about it before we actually go forward and implement.
Yeah, and I do appreciate your bringing up the communications and the education piece, because what our direction right now is that we're going to be transparent, we're going to communicate so our residents understand what's going to happen, and then they can ask questions. And so we need to make sure that we have good communication, and I know that's going to come out of our communications department. So the chief's going to do some work. Jen and Ryan, you're going to just take a look and see what some of the experiences have been. And I know people with their scooters, if they're leaving, it's personal, so they probably take it home. But if they're leaving it around, that's a problem. So, okay,
Madam Mayor,
yeah,
thinking of public transit, like some of our MBTA buses have bike racks. The question is, would a scooter be allowed to be attached or taken inside a bus? We have to consider that.
well, that's going to be a business question, not a city question.
Yeah, because it's a moving
We
geographical.
do not allow our vehicles
Not
on
allowed.
public transportation.
Okay, so they'll shut off, or that wouldn't matter, right? How do you enforce that they can't be taken on a bus if there's no real electronic way to keep that from happening? It may quit, but that's fine. That's what they want it to quit, so they can take it on the bus.
If it ended up in another community, I would imagine Bird would find that person
Yeah.
pretty heavily.
So the point is, I'll bring it back to the MBTA board, because this may be, would this be the first city, sorry, Jen, possibly, or Chief, what are the other cities that have tested this? Are they within the MBTA trade area?
They're in Metro,
Well,
the Metro Transit.
I mean, like really the more suburb to suburb type service. I don't see somebody taking it with them to downtown, but maybe they did.
We'll find out.
Okay, so, and then I'll alert MBTA that we're considering this, and that the MBTA will maybe have to have policy,
Yeah.
the drivers say, I'm sorry, we don't allow birds being taken on.
Well, and the poor company is saying no,
Well,
you can't transport.
yeah,
our
that's great, I'm
scooters.
sure they say no, but that doesn't stop somebody from just picking it up and taking it on the bus, right? Doesn't matter what they say. So, I mean, it's not enforceable. It has to be enforced by transit, basically, is what I'm saying. Then the other question is just timeline. Is this spend the next few months? And is this still going to be launched in Burnsville this year? Or is this a next spring type of thing that you foresee?
I think
Jen,
realistically, next spring, there's a lot of work to do on our side, but we'll work with Garrett and see if we can make, his timeline work. I
Yeah,
think
that makes more sense.
Garrett had asked for it this year,
Private
but I'm not sure if we can make it happen.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We have the little ones.
Yeah, and the only reason I brought that up is, you keep saying the word pilot and testing it out. Like the summer and fall would be the greatest, or the late summer into fall, because at least we would get a couple months of data before the winter months hit. We're going to pull off the scooters anyway. But obviously, I know these things take time. And again, we're just here to support you and make sure if and when this gets implemented, it's done right.
yeah, well,
If somebody wanted to write it.
Garrett, I would say work with our staff, with Jen,
Do that.
yeah, And,
Madam Mayor, Jen had a
Yeah.
comment.
My only comment is I think we could realistically make it work for a full season of scooter operations from spring, summer, fall, and not try and, like, it'd be a short window to have a lot of communications push and then stop and then start up again in the spring. So I would recommend we go for the spring.
Madam Mayor, members
Yeah.
of the council, I would tend to agree with Jen that this is probably something where we need
Yeah.
staff time, and just from a capacity perspective, we're probably looking at next season before something realistically happens, just
yeah.
so your expectations are,
And-
so we have clarity around expectations.
Team, I do hate
And
to
I
do
like
this.
the
I have
fact
to
that
jump
we,
to another
you know, we're
council
gonna
call.
spend
Do you have
time
any last
educating the
questions
public.
For me,
Garrett?
I have to jump to another city council call. Do you have any last questions for me?
Okay, thank you for being with us. And you understand where we're at, and to manage your expectation, Jen will be in touch. Our police chief will have some work to do. And then we know that the expectation is we start this next spring.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time, and please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And Jen, looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Yeah. Okay, the next item is the legacy events. And Garrett, I believe that's you.
It is. Madam Mayor, members of the council, let's mark June 14th, 2022 as the first time two Garretts have ever presented back-to-back to
No, and,
council.
you know, you're the only Garrett I know, and then here's this other person, I was like,
Now, for those of you who have familiar names, it's probably normal, but anytime someone says my name, I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? But you guys were talking about the other Garrett most of the night, so.
I've never had that experience. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
yeah. I mean, with all the Dans in the room.
Good evening. We are here to talk about the city contribution to legacy, community, and special events. Earlier this year, it was a request by council that we bring this topic back to you. And we have, I think this is the fourth time in the last 6 years that we've had the legacy event policy before you, just to talk about different things that are going on with legacy events in the community and whatnot. So the purpose of the legacy event is kind of define the parameters for what is each event, what is, I'll refer to fire muster until we get closer to the end, because there is a name change, and I want to be respectful of the name changes.
What did you say?
Yes, to festival and fire muster, but, what is specifically fire muster? What specifically is international festival, art and all that jazz, et cetera. So that's what the policy helps do, is set what those parameters are. It also allows city staff to understand what the expectation is for city support, both on the budgeting and work end of it, but also being able to work with the event providers to make them aware of what they can expect from the city for support. That leads into how it assists the planners and staff with how we prepare the daily activities and things like that the city assists with. And then, as I mentioned, budget preparations so that we can properly understand the financial implications for each year of budget. So just a quick history. Took this, I did find in my archives all the way back to 2006, but the first real change we have was in 2010. That one came before council just to recognize that there were 4 legacy events going on. We had Art and All That Jazz and Tender Hearts Half Marathon. We're part of the Burnsville Fire Muster and International Festival of what we were supporting. We more clearly defined the staff level of service support. Things like recycling and communications, I believe, were added vaguely, which had not been happening prior to that. And then at that time, the city supported 50% of all costs, so there's no cap. So for example, you'll see later in the slide, if fire muster was a $26,000 contribution, the city would support that for $13,000 if that's what the total amount was. If for some reason it was $20,000 that year, the city would support it at $10,000. And then the festival itself would reimburse the city for the other 50%. In 2013, some things happened where Tender Hearts Half Marathon was no longer a legacy event, so we amended the policy at that time. And then, as I mentioned, in 2010, communications was referenced, but we put some more detail into what does that mean on how communications is supporting the legacy events. In 2017, we had council action that directed staff to waive all the fees for fire muster that year, and that was for a 2017 year only. In 2018, the Tender Hearts race has been officially replaced by the Heart of the City race, and it was recognized as part of the legacy event under the umbrella of the fire muster. And at that time, we also looked at, so we had a year of staffing costs, which are always tracked, and we knew in 2018 that the reported staff costs associated with each of the legacy events had a fixed dollar amount, and so the policy was updated to reflect those most recent costs from the year before, and we replaced the no cap to a not to exceed, but we maintained the 50% of the new level. So in this case, if International Festival would have actually spent $8,000 in city services, we would have only covered the cost of 50% of the $3,600, so it would have been $1,800, whereas previously, if it was $8,000, we would have covered $4,000 of it. So that change took place in 2018. In 2019, we removed the 50% and changed that to 100%. And also maintain the not to exceed. So back to that international festival example, in this case, if the if the international festival is $8,000, we would cover the $3,626, so 100% of that amount. But the international festival would have to reimburse the city the difference between that number and the $8,000 amount.
So I'm looking at the International Festival, and it's 3,626.
Correct.
So it, say again, because you're talking 8,000.
I was just giving an example of how the policy change could impact a festival. So if the International Festival only used $3,500 that year of city services, it would all be covered because they did not exceed the $3,626.
Okay,
Yep.
I get it. Yeah, Dan.
Would it be a fair statement to say that in 2019, we actually returned to what we did pre-Great Recession, where we supported 100%? 50% was injected by this council, and during the Great Recession, because we were in a Great Recession and we needed to cut costs. But prior to that decision, 100% of the costs, I know for the fire muster, were covered. We invoked a 50% limit because we were cutting costs. And that caused those organizations, in this case, the fire muster board at the time, eliminated fireworks on Friday night. Prior to that, they had fireworks both nights for years and years and years. So the history didn't start in 2010. That's when it actually changed and got cut to 50%. It was 100% prior to that.
Correct.
That was the beginning of when we started this cut in support for these festivals.
Well, the good thing is that we have all of this, you have it all archived.
Correct. Yeah, so the 2010, what you indicated is that reflects so there was no cap before in 2006, but this adjustment.
2010 was
where
triggered by
change
our
took place.
4.3 million budget cuts and 20 full-time employees, and we cut our festival support by 50%. And had that triggered also the discussion of creating this legacy and identifying which one they were, or what they were, because we thought we needed to put more parameters and guardrails around it. But it was the reason for the 50% reduction in support. And it didn't come down until 2019, quite a few years after the recession was well over with.
Yes, so.
Just before the pandemic.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Gary, can we go back a slide or two? I just want to see some numbers here real quick. That's 2018.
Yeah.
Back one more time. Okay, so 2018, 2019, the service level money amount remained the same. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, so up until 2018, there was no cap number. It had always been up to 50%. So if a festival would have spent $100,000 worth of services of city staff, we would have contributed $50,000 to that. And so the leaders at that time in 2018 said, that's a difficult thing to budget for. Let's try to determine what is an amount that we can expect. And that's how 2017 was the most recent numbers that we had. So that's how we got to the 2018 numbers. Those were maintained in 2019, but it went from 50% up to 100% coverage.
Back to 100%.
Yes.
In 2019,
we
did anyone
returned.
go over that number?
I believe we have had, I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think Fire Muster got close.
But I don't think it went over in one of those two. I don't know if it was 2018 or 2019. That it must have been 2019. I don't think they went over from the 2018 year.
What about 2021?
2021, they did go over.
Are you talking about the festival?
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
talking about going over the number.
Yeah, we went over, and that was why I brought this up, because ultimately what was really driving the biggest excess overage was billable labor time, which had gone up. And if you remember, we first locked in at 2013's number, and then we updated it and locked in at 2017's number when we had this discussion again and said, hey, things are going up in costs, and we're, here it is 5, 6, 7 years later, and we're still using this 23 number, right?
Actually,
2013
all that
number.
jazz was based on a 2012 number.
Is that still 2012's number?
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or 2013? Yeah, because there was so many years that you didn't have it, so there wasn't
No,
any.
I get that part of it.
Right, there wasn't any data to say it needed to be adjusted, right?
Correct. Which, Councilmember Keeley, you lead into just the facts of some of the things that we had heard council talk about. So I mentioned this has been reviewed for the last 6 years. We've had cost of living changes, employee compensation plan took place, so we had those changes. There's staff lane changes. And I've had the pleasure of reporting on this particular topic all 4 times, but I have never been the liaison to any of these, and it's an ongoing change. 2 of the staff that were liaisons, both have moved on either through retirement or to other communities, and there's just been little pieces here. So it's been a pleasure to try to collect the information and get the accuracy and whatnot. So I know for certain there were some inaccurate reports with Fire Muster last year, going over by a reported amount of about 6,000, but if we factor in our police department not having staff available and us having to contract that out and some of those dollars, it's my estimate it was probably closer to there's probably about $40,000 worth of expenses and whatnot. So trying to chase it all down and figure it all out is a challenge, and that is why that's factored into some of the options that I'm going to move on to next. Consideration number 1. Fire Muster in 2022 has officially changed its name to the Festival and Fire Muster. So I think at a minimum, we would want to update the policy to reflect that. We will also want to circle back with the Fire Muster. As I mentioned, one of the purposes of the policy is to define what the event is. In 21, because it was a special year for fire muster at that time, they added a second night of fireworks, and it's my understanding that there's going to be a second night of fireworks again this year. And
Yes.
according to the current policy, it recognizes fire muster as just one night of fireworks, right? So that may be something that we would want to look at if option one is selected, as what are the parameters of each of the festivals currently, and are they accurate, and are we comfortable with that? Option two is for some of the reasons shared in the facts area. We last updated the level of services in 2021, and for example, Councilmember Gustafson's question, the fire muster had exceeded that by about 6,500. It was probably higher than that. So do we want to revisit the 2017 level of services and establish a new cap based on the data that we have? Or come up with another number altogether for each of those? And then option three was looking at a way that maybe some other communities do, and also how we kind of handle some other areas in our community, and that might be to consider just coming up with the basic level of service. And in that situation, the city will work with each event planner, understand what roads do you need blocked off, what EMS support do you need, what police and security and safety do you need, when do our parks need to be out there to get the property prepped, when do we need to be back to clean up, do we need to use the ice center and have it staffed, all those types of things. And once we've decided that all fits into what is the basics of what the festivals are about, the city just goes ahead and provides that service. Our staff aren't recording their hours. We are simply just, yes, this is what we do year after year. As long as the festival doesn't change significantly in some way that prompts additional services, it doesn't matter what the salaries are, it doesn't matter if it's overtime, it doesn't matter whatever. So that is what really is the concept behind the basic level of service.
That actually likens back to the way it was pre-2010. There was a minimal tracking, and it was basically, the city was doing public safety, public works, et cetera, and the organizers kind of did everything else. And it did make it, I think when we were trying to track it, because we had to then have a number to then cut in half in 2010, when we were faced with the budget cuts, that triggered the whole, okay, now we have to keep track of all this, and in a lot of detail, because we have to be accountable to this number. So I think I can't imagine how much staff time it takes to track every single person, every single hour, and every single thing that's done for a festival the size of the festival in Fire Muster, let alone the Art and Hall of Jazz and
Kind of easy.
and the staff demands for the international festival. But it has to be fairly daunting just to try and keep track of it all.
Yeah, and also, or it falls through the cracks because people are so busy with everything, right?
Exactly.
And so then it's not done very well,
Right.
too, right? So, I mean, there's,
It's staff intensive and not very accurate.
If we had to bill
Oh,
for
so the
all
best
of the
both worlds.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
if we had to actually
Demonstrating the
bill
complication.
for the staff time to track it all, any idea what that cost would be?
I do not. I mean,
I mean, it seems kind of, anyway, I certainly would voice support for going back to what worked before, because number one, we're not in a great recession, but we might be. Things are changing, but we'll deal with that as it
I remember
comes.
you said that with other discussions we're going to have.
Yeah, well, according to the CNBC financial analyst this morning, it should be short, but we'll see. And, it really does, speaking on behalf of Vince, and we chatted about this, because the festival and Fire Muster is so large over 4 days, and it encompasses a large part of public safety and public works, it is our largest community-wide festival, like Egan's Days and Alba Valleys and Savage and Lakeville's Panaprog, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a big user of resources because it drives massive crowds. And it's only going to get bigger but it's not getting bigger in number of days. It's just getting bigger in the events within those 4 days and the number of people who are going to attend. And so I think, from my perspective, it would be my suggestion, let's go back to what worked before the recession caused us to derail. And it's unfortunate, I think, for all the festivals that we extended our cost controls, because what we said was, we're out of a recession and things are fine, but we don't believe in investing in your festival, your international festival, the Heart of the City race, the fire muster at the time, like other cities do. Because if you saw the email that Garrett shared, and this was presented back in 2019, maybe, was that?
It's current, up to date.
I mean, or it's upside, but the previous time that it was presented was maybe 2019 or something like that. Where
I could not find anything on record, Councilmember Keelan,
Oh,
that
yeah,
was ever shared.
we, it was one of those cycles where we took a look at this, 4 out of the last 6 years or whatever. Because I remember it specifically because I was making the case, if you could find the video, you'll hear me say, I want to be a part of a city council that believes in investing in these festivals that reflect our community. And I found it odd that we stuck to these cost limits so long. At the same time, all of us were unanimous in wanting to bring more festivals to the city because it raised the quality of life. It raised the residents' happiness of living in a city that they could go to a party on the plaza. I think that was the birth of the party on the plaza, the Rochester Thursdays, which Councilmember Schultz brought forward. And I shared a picture.
I was here with that.
And you were there with that, right? There was this big push to do more than what we were already doing, but we were still willing to shortchange supporting the ones that we were doing that have been around for as long as 41 years. And when you sent around that comparison, it was even more glaring than I remember it. It basically came down to all the cities around us provide all that public safety and public works. Just as you stated very eloquently, we just, the city sits down with a planner and we just provide that public safety and public works. But those cities also contribute anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 in cash to pay for fireworks and other things on top of all the public safety and public works. And here we are, I think an older and a better city, certainly a city with more diversity, and we're more proud of our history. And yet we're saying, well, we'll give you, up until 2019, we'll give you half of what public safety and public works is. And that was it. And then we had to come begging for special events like 40th anniversaries or something. So when you look at Burnsville and you compare us in the past, before we made this change in 2019, and even today, and you compare it to all the cities around us, we really shortchange these major events that yet we believe in so strongly. So my request tonight is go back to the public safety, public works support, as long as the number of days or the structure of the event doesn't change. And even consider doing something more than that. I mean, I kind of feel like, why are we still the cheapest of all the cities around us when it comes to supporting our festivals? Because if we just do public safety and public works, we're still 10 grand behind pretty much any other city. The next closest one was all public safety, public works, and 10,000. And many were 40 and 50 grand. The other thing I just want to, and I'll get off my soapbox, it's stated that all these other cities waive all permit fees. Burnsville waives only one permit fee. The festival has paid every year all of the other permit fees. Now, it's not a big expense. It's about $1,500, $1,800 or something like that. But I noticed in your comparison that every single city waives all permit fees, waives all permit fees. And I thought, I wonder why we don't do that too. And that was something I hadn't really been aware of until I read your research and those comparisons. And then I asked our former treasurer, I said, do we pay any, permit fees? And he sent me the whole list. We pay for all but one. So I think that should be part of it too, personally.
Well, I think let's also make sure that we understand. So all of these other cities only have one festival. We have 4.
Yes.
We actually have more than 4.
And so the other is the cost.
Because we're better. We're far
Yes,
better.
so we're in budget times, and this is a great want, and we all want these amenities. So I want to make sure that we all understand the budget impact on all of this. If you're going to go back to that, and the Burnsville Unity Festival Fire Muster, is 4 days. And my sense is that if it gets any bigger, each festival will need to then cover those added expenses. Because,
If it gets bigger, the other ones would have to cover, is that what you're saying? or-
no, if it gets bigger, you talked about it's going to, somebody would want, for instance, the
Attendance.
International Festival, it starts at 3 and goes till 9 or 10. 10 or 9? 10.
10, I believe.
Yeah. So if it starts at 12, now we're going to add more service.
In theory, yes, yes. And that'd be hours instead of like adding a day per se, but
Yeah.
yep.
So I'm just looking, these are wonderful and we all enjoy it. But I also understand the challenges that we have when we get into budgets. And I'm looking at Dan T over there, and he's going to start calculating all of this because right now, to your point, Garrett, a lot has changed with regards to the cost of service. Not only police and fire, there's public works, there's parks and recreation, and I don't know who else, are all a part of that.
Well, if I can address that, Madam Mayor, there's no change to the Heart of the City race, there's no change to the Art and All That Jazz, and there's no change to the International Festival. The only change is the cost drivers for the Burnsville Festival and Fire Muster, which we were billed, I think, 3,400 sound about right? For 21.
Yeah.
The number you saw on screen was a little higher because they've done a little deeper dive into the numbers and the audit trail. But we were billed and paid an additional about 3,400, 3,800, something like that.
$4,000.
Or about, yeah, close to maybe it was 3,800. Sorry, $4,000. And so now the real cost, as the analysis was done, was a little bit higher than that. But that's the number that we have, and I don't know what cost drivers existed in 2021 because of having to bring in Egan and what all that ended up being.
Yeah.
But I was given a number by
Last
BJ.
year, we had Egan come out and help.
Yeah, because there was a wedding and vacations all lapping over the same weekend. But I know that I asked our chief Jungman what the added Friday night fireworks cost was, and the number he gave me was 1,800 of that 3,800. So we were over by 2,000 prior to that. Now, there was still a lot more that in the sort of post-audit, it ended up higher than that. Whether that'll happen in 2022, I don't know. I don't know what the labor, and are we going to have to go to mutual aid for supporting the festival or not? Don't know. That seemed like it was a very unusual, isolated incident. Now, I don't remember we've ever had to bring in other cities before.
No.
Police, right?
Councilman Kelly, we have not. It was
Kind of
The way it worked out.
just an anomaly, right? Yeah.
short-staffed and a variety of factors.
Yeah, so we're dealing with a number that's probably 6,000 or 8,000 maybe, and that's it. The other three festivals don't really have any events that are changing that. So if the city were to choose to do what I'm suggesting, it's really just taking an invoice away from the festival and fire muster for labor and et cetera, as those costs continue to go up every year. So I understand your budget concern. It's a pretty small number with the size of budget that we have. It's not really that big of a concern.
Every time I hear small number, small numbers add up to big numbers.
Yeah, I think 6,000 to 8,000 in a $100 million budget is pretty small.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So the thing is, we're also looking at staffing and how do we do all of that, and so, yeah. So what I'm hearing is option 3? Is that what I'm hearing? Is that what your option 3?
Yeah, I think that's the one that encapsulates what Garrett number 2 has presented, and what I think I reiterated maybe.
Dante, you're smiling. Can you share?
Oh, I was thinking he was Garrett number 1.
I was thinking the same thing.
Well,
I was actually going to make. I was
He
gonna
is the
make that
number one
comment,
Garrett, but
so-
the other Garrett went first, so he went second, that's all.
So Garrett, you're saying number one, maintain the policy as is with the exception of changing the name of the fire muster. That returns to to your part.
No, option one would be doing basically nothing to the policy other than updating the name.
change.
Dan
Yeah.
was referring, there was two Garretts earlier.
Okay.
Option two is if we wanted to come up with new numbers not to exceed. And option three would be just to, staff would no longer track staff times. We would provide basic service for, and I will share again to, so it's basic service for public safety, basic service for public works, for parks, for recreation, for communications, for recycling, for all of the departments that participate in these festivals. So all of their basic service would not be tracked. The one thing for clarity would still be if in the event that a festival wants to expand, how do we manage that?
Yeah.
And when do we consider, for example, if there are changes in a budget year, how does that impact things, right? So do those go into effect the following year, or do they become effective immediately and things like that? So I just think, I know right now, there's a discussion that there are changes to Fire Muster, but not to the other festivals. But what do we do in the event that International Festival wants to be 2 days, or Art and All That Jazz wants a backstage area that they're gonna charge some money for a special concert, and we have to set up and do things differently, right? That's outside of the, what's that?
We'll rent the Ames Center for that.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, I'm throwing out hypothetical situations, but do those, because the parameters of the festival have changed, does that cause the need to charge an amount to cover those parameters? So,
Or to the point, and then I'm coming to you, that the legacy event would be directly responsible for these additional staffing resources and expenses that would be billed accordingly.
that could be an option.
That's what number 3 says.
Yeah, I take personally very seriously the obligation that, as the new board chair of the Festival and Fire Muster, that it's a 4-day event, and that I don't have free reign under any circumstance to go, well, let's just add Sunday and keep the carnival there and add another day, and thanks, police and fire, you're there, right? Expect you to be there. I believe any structural change that adds days or even hours, but I don't think that's a big deal, personally, that it should come back, and that this council would have to approve any deviation from the structure that has been long established by these festivals. I mean,
Because the
International's
costs-
1 day, Art and All That Jazz is 1 day, Festival's 4-day, Heart of the City Race is 1 morning. They are what they are, and they've been that way for many, many, many years. I just think they ought to stay that way under this proposal. And any change to that would trigger what you just
You
said.
add, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's number 3, as I was listening to all of that, but, okay, Greg?
If the council were to go the direction of option 3, obviously we would revise policy, bring it back to you, not to be the wet blanket, but I would want to get the city attorney involved. Dan
Yeah.
actually shot me a note. We do need to be cautious of public purpose and public expenditures
Exactly.
when it comes to community events. So we'll want to make sure the city attorney's office is involved in the drafting of that policy, and we're all on the same page.
And we should, because it's, no other city in the report that you sent to us has as many festivals than we do. Egan has Fun Fest, 1 event. Cottage Grove has Strawberry Fest, 1 event. And so when you look at everything that they pay, they're paying for 1 event. They don't have
Big ones.
all of the different events that we have.
Yeah,
And so our
Madam Mayor,
cost is,
just,
so when you add up our costs, we pay for a lot more than,
I would say for the record, I did ask my colleagues for their major event information, so.
Yeah, they could have party on the plazas, but,
Yeah,
or their version of that, but you
yeah,
didn't ask for it.
I can't confirm or deny that.
Party in the Plaza is a different item, line item, than the festivals. It's not.
Oh, I agree. I think that's the way I understood your request is what big event, what do you do for your big
For their-
festival event?
for their
It
city-
wasn't,
their
do you do
city
anything
festival.
more than that? Does the city actually fund any other, maybe smaller types of city-funded festivals or events,
Well,
like a Thursday in the Main Street
Apple
Thursday?
Valley's Wednesday in the Park is funded by their foundation, their cultural foundation. Because, now Commissioner Mary Hayman, but that's how they fund their Wednesday night parties. Yeah.
This discussion happens every 2 years, it seems like, around here these days. I think much like what's happened in the city, where we have failed to fund, we've done that with our festivals as well. We're dealing, or no, that Jazz is dealing with a 2012 number, you're dealing with a 2017 number. And so every year, the contribution that the city gives is less service for the same amount of money because it costs us more money to give that service. So there is some merit to doing something like the number 3 going down the road, but that also means that you've got to support the budget so that we can afford to do these things. And that's an important part of it. And part of that is just what the chief was talking about. Our costs have gone up because we got people on time and a half to cover all this stuff now. We don't just have officers that we can put out there on regular time anymore. I mean, so it's a package that we have to do all together. I'm okay with going with number 3 because I think that's probably the right thing for us to do. But
Yeah.
we need, as a council, we need to support the budgets
Yeah.
that are presented to us by our staff. And I think that's very important.
Because all of these things are important
Yep.
to making our community what it is, a vibrant community,
Boldly
And-
leading.
boldly leading and welcoming to all. Yes. So am I hearing 3? Or, yeah, Kara says 3?
Yeah.
3,
That's what my notes say.
yeah. Is that,
I haven't decided yet.
is that good direction?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
If that helps alleviate staff time calculating hours, I hope that
there's
that
an
would be
expense
a
on it,
welcome
too.
change by our staff.
It absolutely does, and really, this is a policy decision of the council. I've said that to a few of you individually, and we'll take the direction that you have to recraft whatever option it might be. But I will tell you operationally, this solves a tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort. And frankly, on the flip side of that, I don't particularly like not doing everything well, and it's hard to do well. It's hard to be accurate with it.
And our surveys tell us that our citizens, they like our parks and our festivals. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
that's
Without
very
a-
high on their priorities.
It is an amenity that enriches their lives.
Exactly.
And it's very good. I just want to make sure we support our budget because everything that's going forward is with, we need people. All of these things are about people. We need people to help us make these events safe and people come and have a great experience. So,
Most people think these are city events.
yeah, they think so.
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
They may not be, but that's what everyone believes when they're coming to it. This is
The
the,
city's a
Operated out
partner in
of
it,
city.
though. In every one of these events, the
oh,
city's a partner.
oh, absolutely. It's a huge partner, but I think Vince's statement is 100% true. Attendees believe they're coming
Oh, yeah.
to a city event,
Yeah. Well,
not
they
a
see
private
all of-
entity, nonprofit-run event. They're coming to a city event.
And they see all the personnel out there.
It's our
Yes.
community, right? We
Absolutely.
talk about it, be it the festival and Fire Muster or International Fest Art and all that jazz. From a staff perspective, it's our responsibility and commitment to the community that the partnership is strong, and these events are great. And this policy is simply reflective of how we get there administratively.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
does this number 3, I can't, trying to find it, pull it back up, but does that include the permitting? Does Art and All That Jazz pay for its own permitting as well?
No, we never have.
Those are all waived? You're,
Yeah.
like, all permitting?
Yeah, we just. that has all
Block
been
Street, obstructions, whatever those are. I have a list of them. But you haven't
No,
ever,
we've never been charged a permit. In fact, I was
Well,
surprised last year to hear that
Do you
would
have
be
different
charged.
permits? I mean,
Well, we are paying for permits every year, and we always have several permits, but I'm just wondering, I thought everybody was paying.
Well,
So maybe we should clean that up too.
I don't have our treasurer's report in front of me. I don't
Well,
know.
my recommendation would be that the city adopt what all the other cities are doing, and not just waive the permit fees for these legacy events. And we'll no longer have to pay for them as a festival, since we
Yeah.
might be the only one that's still doing it.
Well, I'm sure that we have permit fees depending on what those fees are. But you construct things, don't you? You bring in all of those,
Well, like electrical
I'm sure there's
permit for
electrical
temporary
and-
service.
Yep.
Electrical permit for the carnival, liquor license, that may be something that, because
Well,
state law has it, right?
yeah, we don't.
Obstruction permit, we actually pay $114 so we can put signs in the median on Civic Center Parkway as you enter the
Yeah, we
festival.
don't have to do that.
Special application, event application permit and tent permit of $250 to put up big tents.
The big tents, we don't have that.
Well, what did you say to inspections?
A special
been
event,
around for
oh,
a few years.
say what?
What did you say to inspections that that's happening?
You know, so I don't know, if those are part of this, because we're the only ones paying, maybe any permits that are allowed by law that the city doesn't can waive, I think should be part of this. But if by law, like the liquor,
Yeah.
I don't know that one, but yeah, we would still have to buy that, I understand
Well,
that.
see, we're
But the
in
other
the-
ones, if we don't
We're in
need
the
to,
heart of the
let's not do
city
it.
and you can. You don't need a liquor license because we have, the Med Cruise has their license
Catering local law.
You need a
They
cater,
don't-
someone needs a catering license to
Yeah.
put liquor on it.
and they have a catering
Take it
license.
We do, we're selling beer, so we purchase a liquor,
That, yeah,
right?
and, yeah.
Yep.
But we have a,
But for like the beer tasting, Red Lion, we're using their
Yes.
Yep.
liquor.
yeah.
So maybe
I would
if,
agree with the waiving of permits.
for whichever ones are allowed to be waived, that are city-controlled, we'll just, can we include that in this
Council, please.
motion or
Let Joel know.
agreement?
I'm assuming Joel will know those.
Yeah.
We certainly will,
Take a
city
look at
attorney will be part of this. I just want to make sure I have clarity and direction of the council. It seems that
Or just take a look and see with
we will
with
include,
legal.
we will include waiving any applicable fees in our work around redevelopment of the policy.
Sounds to me like your fees are less than $500,
It's about 1,200 and some change.
1,200.
Yeah,
will-
but the liquor is a
Yeah, I
chunk
think
of
one of
that,
your
right?
street
The
closing
liquor
fees
is a
kinda
chunk of
high.
that?
Yeah, it's like 400 and
I'll
something.
also,
I think we'll need to take a look at that because there's a liability. and
Oh,
you have-
I fully expect the liquor
Yeah.
is probably not something that couldn't be, and I would think in these other cities that say they waive fees, it's probably these other fees,
again,
right?
going back to
Electrical.
applicable fees, we'll work
Administrative
internally.
fees, I think we can take a look at.
We'll work internally to develop that and
Yeah.
get back to
Can't
the
waive
council
liquor
with a
fees.
policy. I will also say to Councilmember Keeley's request to the discussion, Fire Station 1 is a good example of it, city project. We waived applicable fees to that project just because it made sense in
Yeah,
how we
and I
were
remember that,
operating. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
do think that there
It
is
is
some consistency there that we're building towards.
It's
being
our
reasonable.
building,
Yeah.
and we're paying ourselves, we're just taking it from this pot
Correct.
and putting it to this pot.
Correct.
So, Madam Mayor, I believe I've heard we are going with option 3, which is to provide a basic service without tracking. We will add language that waives applicable fees allowable by law. And the one other thing that I think would allow us to bring back a policy that would work the first time on consent would be,
Guardrails, days.
do you want to speak to the
I wanna-
fire musters, what it is, which currently says 1 night of fireworks? Do we want to reword it that it says up to 2 nights of fireworks?
Well,
How do
that's a
we-
good point. I would like, because we're turning the clock back to pre-2010, go back dozens and dozens of years, there was always fireworks Friday and Saturday night. Again, the only reason the festival ever cut fireworks on Friday night was because they got cut 50% support from the city,
But
and they
did
had to
the
find a
city,
place to cut.
Fund those 2 fireworks, or did you raise the
That was
money
just
for
a,
it?
that was just a one-off.
But the festival, your
Oh, way
fire
back when?
muster always
Yeah,
funded.
way back
funded
when the festival funded the fireworks, the city funded all of the police and fire and safety support
Yeah.
for both nights. That's what I'm saying, let's just go back to that whole thing, because
You'll
the
raise
fireworks
money-
are coming back
you'll-
Friday and Saturday
You'll raise the
night.
money for the fireworks,
To
but
pay for the fireworks, yeah, we just need the city support for the, right, as you, thank you,
the-
thank you to the Lions.
Yeah.
A big round of applause for the Lions for funding our Friday night fireworks. They're going to be part of the festival going forward again. They're just always going to be like it used to be. So I would like that into
So you want
that.
police and fire support?
Yes, it automatically falls under, I think the delineation for Garrett, and I'm glad you brought this back up, is because it's not sort of the existing, it's previous to the 2010 cuts. So we're going back to prior to 2010 cuts with the city support. We will bring back the firework cost for Friday night. What we're
It's the
asking is the
staffing.
city provide I think it's the fire department who sort of,
Yep.
Yeah.
cordons off the area and provides the
Yeah.
safety landing zone and
Yeah.
et cetera, right?
Okay, and then I also want to make sure that in your background, that the language of the legacy events would be directly responsible for any additional. So we're doing everything, this is the baseline, but if,
Yeah, the
If you're gonna
guardrails would
add-
be
Yeah,
the
if you're gonna add
days,
anything,
events,
now
or
you're
whatever
responsible
that
for
trigger
it.
additional costs, right? We have one, and this is not something I'm asking on behalf of the festival. We're adding a soccer tournament Friday and Saturday, and we need some fencing and some striping. That's going to be an additional cost to the festival to hire the city to get the fencing and to stripe off these fields. That isn't that is a brand-new thing, although maybe 15, 20 years ago they apparently I'm told they had a soccer tournament, but I think they were happening in like the soccer fields, right, the regular soccer fields. This is a special futsal 5v5 tournament where we're going to, the person presenting is going to create 8 fields out of one large normal-sized soccer field behind Sky Oaks, and we're looking for somebody, and the city makes sense, to help stripe the fields and put fence up so the balls don't go from one field to the next. And the festival is bearing the cost of whatever the city will charge to be able to provide that.
okay, because that's additional.
Because it's not something that's really kind of, let's say in recent history, it's never been there. Right?
Yeah. Okay,
So I think, I heard that it can be, the festival and fire muster will be defined as a 3-day event with fireworks on 2 of the 3 days. Are you comfortable with that
he
language?
says 4 days.
Pardon?
You said 4 days.
No, fireworks, you said, I think?
I'm sorry, so that could be another change. So currently, the policy says, there's a description of each event, and it defines the fire muster, because that's what it is, as a 3-day event with firework displays on one night. So I
Oh,
want to
it's
bring
been
that
4
back.
days for 10 plus 15 years. I don't know. I don't know where the 3 days came from, but
Right. So we want
it
it
used
to
to
be
actually be 4 days.
a
But
4-day
they took
event.
Sunday away
with fireworks on 2 nights.
on 2 nights, correct.
And we're good with that.
It's actually
Ryan,
5 days at one.
Ryan has,
Yeah, it's 5 at one time, right? Yeah.
Ryan, you have some thoughts on all of this, because he's Public Works and he has to bring in all of the,
Really don't want to complicate this, but if the whole goal is to get rid of us not having to keep track of our time and all that, and now we're saying we're going to put on a soccer tournament, and it makes sense for the city to go and do all the striping, the only way to keep track of that time, to charge it would be to
Keep track of the time.
keep track of the time. So I hear that and I go, it seems like we need to adopt the basic level service, and it is what we're gonna do. And then if we're gonna put on a soccer tournament a different way, that should be privately determined how to put that on, if we're trying to get to the point where we're not keeping track of our hours and the administrative costs. So I'm not saying we don't want to do it, but to me, if we're going to offer a basic level service, that's what we're going to do if we're trying to get rid of keeping track of our time.
well,
So-
but this is an addition, because we're saying if there's any additional cost, the events are going to have to cover that. From my perspective, when I look at our events, we're looking, what is it that we're going to do? How much is it going to cost us? Then we go out and raise the money for it.
If I hear you right, Ryan, it's maybe you're suggesting it might be preferable for the festival to just find a
Someone else,
striping company that has some silt fence that can be installed and put into use, as opposed to coming to the city to pay the city to do it? Because of this desire just to make it all or nothing?
I would say so, yes. I mean,
Okay.
do we want private companies out striping our fields?
Well, it's the
Well, it's a school
school.
district field.
Right.
Okay.
It's
So
the
in this-
school's
In this
ground.
particular situation, you know, we may have to contract, I mean, the school district will have to decide who can stripe it. Who do they want on their, there's a lot of unknowns that
Sure.
are still being looked into right
Okay.
now.
Maybe BAC could do it.
And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
from
maybe
that
BAC.
budgetary standpoint of at least
Soccer clubs.
each festival, each year goes into, here's what we're planning to do.
Right.
If it grows, let's look at what the impacts are on that for the following year, but it'd be nice to have a commitment for staff and budgeting up front to say, this is what we know we need to do. If there's a need to grow the scope, we'll talk about that in 2023. Right?
No, don't bring it back.
I know, I'm sorry.
Greg,
Every other year.
I think to try to tie this up, the direction I'm hearing from the council is option 3, define basic level of service. Anything beyond that, there would be independent agreements on
Who's
cost and who's responsible. And I'll remind the council, I do want to get the city attorney's office involved in this.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Just to make sure that there isn't anything that we're missing right now. We'll do all of that work with the hope that we can package something simple and concise back to you that can be handled as a consent item. If it can't, I'll let you know and we'll talk more.
okay. Is everybody okay?
So the clay pigeon tournament next year is probably not looking like a real good idea.
Let you guys handle that.
You know, and the helicopter rides, I don't know where we're gonna be able to find.
really like those.
Yeah,
No kidding.
Skeet shoot.
okay. We're going to,
Take a 5-minute break.
okay, we're going to take a 7-minute break, and then we'll be back to cover the last topic.
Before we go on to the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a break before the big.
We're back on. We're reconvened, and the next item is the housing tax credit. And our Assistant Community Development Director, Regina Dean, is going to tee this one up for us.
Hi, Mayor.
Regina.
Thank you, members of the council. Just wait for the presentation to pull up.
Okay. Is that being run from Tim?
At least
Yep,
there's
there
no
it
dog
is.
scratching
Yep.
at the door.
I do want to mention that Tony Schertler from the CDA is in attendance, as well as Kathy Kugel from the CDA staff, and Chris Stoka with MWF Properties, who is, the MWF Properties is referenced in the background as approaching the CDA about housing tax credits. So he is here also, in case any questions come up. We have a team to help answer any additional questions. So background, a developer did approach the CDA to request financing, specifically HOPE and home financing and tax credits. The CDA is an allocating agency for low-income tax credits. It doesn't specifically run through the city, but whenever the CDA receives, Community Development Agency receives a application, they send out a letter notifying the city, and cities have the opportunity to weigh in on the request. Apartment, just a little background on tax credits. Apartment property owners can request these credits. If they are obtained, then there are property tax reductions that occur on the property for a minimum of 10 years. That's the commitment. It could stretch on for longer if they make requests in the future, but the commitment is 10 years, and the goal is to keep those units affordable. I do want to note that these housing tax credits or the 4D tax credit projects automatically receive they're automatically classified as 4D low-income rental tax classification, which is a lower tax rate than what the market rate project would provide. And I do want to also note that the legislature has recently had discussions regarding lowering that tax rate even further. In your background, we had Allers provide an analysis of we provided them with basic information about the MWF apartment project, which is 43 units, I believe, a mix of 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 1 bedrooms at Burnsville Parkway in Harriet. Currently, it's a vacant lot, and they would like to pursue constructing a 4-story apartment building, affordable housing project there. So I did have Allers complete an analysis, and I just wanted to quickly break down what the city's portion, assuming what the value would be of the property in the future, and then what the city would, what our portion would be based off of the value. And so I just kind of clipped a portion of that report and highlighted for a market rate project based off of the value, it would be about $41,500 a year. A 4D affordable project would be about $17,500. And then if the legislation approves a change in the reduction tax rate, which we believe they will, can't predict the future, but it's leaning that way. There's commitment that it would be about $8,000 for this potential project. So just a quick snapshot. That's just one lens.
Gina, what is that vacant lot bring to the city?
Right now, good question. Don't know if I have that information available right now. Not as much as obviously it would with any type of commercial property or commercial building on the property or even residential. So significantly less than the potential. I
can take significantly.
And
Yeah, I was
Tony,
just gonna look it up,
why
too.
don't you come to the table? And thank you so much for coming.
Madam Mayor, City Council, thank you for having me. My pleasure to be here. So let me tell you a little bit about our process so that you can see sort of the role. So we're not a developer in this case. We do develop housing, we develop senior housing and workforce family. But we are also wear a different hat. We're a bank, a financer. We are a lender on projects, and we are a sub-allocator. And those are dollars we get from the federal government. And we're an entitlement community, which is rare in this country. We're probably 4 states that have sub-allocators like we do here. And so our job is to get those dollars out to public purpose projects of affordable housing. And so what we do in this process, there's sort of 3 legs to the stool. The city, you absolutely control land use, site permitting, everything to pull a permit in your community. That's your power and your responsibility. Our responsibility is to finance the project with the highest public purpose for the lowest public cost, which is our lending financing piece. The state, which is now this 4D issue, has thrown another wrinkle into the conversation. The state has created property tax classifications based on certain types of uses. So that's the 4D, which has a deflating effect on your property taxes, as it does.
Which means when we give a tax credit now, it's now spread out throughout all of the other properties within Burnsville.
Correct, by state law, because we don't have any discretion on that.
And I want people to understand what 4D is and what it does.
Right.
Where it didn't before. When we did George Sherman in the heart of the city, with the home and all of that, and it was, I think that was 10 or 15 years with George Sherman's building on Grand Marketplace.
Madam Mayor, so the tax credit project, the partnership they set up is 15 years, but the obligation for the affordability continues typically to 30 years because there's usually gap financing in there.
Yeah.
So there's a 30-year, typically a 30-year term.
Yeah.
And that 4D attaches to a unit so long as there's an affordable, there's an income qualification and a rent control. So that's what the state has done. Is changed the property tax class rate or offered that, subject to Minnesota Housing Finance approval of it, to get that lower cost. So as the county, we also have that same fiscal impact on us as you do here at the city. We lose that value.
But that property tax that we collect on the 4D is still higher than what we're currently collecting today, and that spreads through the city to help lower taxes for people.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Gustafson, that's the fact question on the particular site you have, and I'm not aware of that, but I do want to let you know that part of this communication that we're having with you is we tell all our cities when we get an application in for financing, and our job is to get as much public purpose done as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And so if there's a rezoning that has to occur in a city, we're going to send a notice out to the cities and say, hey, this applicant has told us that they're preparing to apply for those tax credits and they can get started over the next 12 months or 18 months. So we send that notice out. If you guys send back and go, oh, well, they need a variance or they need a rezoning, we're going to say thank you. And if there's another community that's coming in and says, we have a project, it's already zoned appropriately, they don't need any variances, we're going to go to the guy that's ready.
Yeah.
So we're looking for cities that are ready to go, and when we have multiple ones. So that's the purpose of that letter that comes into you, is if there's still something that you're struggling with and curb cuts or anything else, we just want to make sure that we tell our board, when we do the QAP analysis, which project is ready to go.
Yeah.
It has become a little more complicated with this 4D, because now, and I was on the Planning Commission in St. Paul, we used to have this conversation about fiscal impacts of land use, right? So when the Ford site went from CI to residential, there were a lot of us concerned that we're going to lose commercial industrial property tax base for residential.
Yeah.
It wasn't specific to a development. It was more like a global conversation about your comprehensive plan update. And so in this case, we have this oddity that's occurring here by legislation. We just want to know if the city, if the site plan and the zoning and those things are complete enough that if we award tax credits to this project, that it will be accomplished. We will measure it compared to another community that also has an application in.
I have another question for you then. You're bringing up some points here. So you're looking for, is it appropriately zoned for what they want to do? You don't need permission from the city to give them the loan or do any of that, or
No,
you do?
You do.
No, we
4D.
actually, Mayor Couch, Councilmember Gustafson, right. This is advisory, it's a comment. Unlike a tax increment district where we are, if we came in to create a tax increment district, you do have more pull at to object to that. In this case, these are federal resources that are coming into that we're really a bank. And we are not triggering that 4D. The applicant has to apply to that, they have to get granted that, and it's state classification, tax classification. So we're not making any policy discretionary decisions on that. We're just giving property tax, HOPE dollars, home dollars, tax credit dollars available to
So
the
again, if
project.
it's zoned for that, you can just do
And,
it.
right, we just want to know, do they have permission in your city to build that? And if it's yes, then we put them on our list, okay, city said their site plan is approved, or not approved. We want to know, if there's still things to be negotiated, we want to know when that's going to happen, so we can measure it till we have another project. We can say, this community's got all the permission, moves up the list. That's really what we're looking for. We want your professional observations about how complicated that's going to be.
And Regina, this is a mixed-use zoned area.
Besides within our transit-oriented development zoning district, there is it is a plan unit development. We do have a plan unit development agreement that references a gas station use. So that does need to be rescinded in order for this project to move forward as a apartment
Housing.
building. They also need to plat the property. But from what we've observed so far, the site would meet our zoning code, and basically, but for those two requests, could come in for a building permit only.
Okay,
Thank you.
Kara?
Really, I feel super strongly about another.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, part of what we're trying to accomplish here is move to the path of least resistance.
Yep.
Or enthusiasm, but you don't have to put it in the negative. We have other communities, if there's unanimous consent, they're trying to redevelop a piece of property or reposition a piece of property, and they say, hey, we really love this. We also have geographic distribution. We're trying to make sure that we're not putting all these resources into one community. This is only one piece of a evaluation that we do. So I think if there's any anxiety, we like to know about it, because if there's other communities that are unanimous in support, great. We want to go to where the project can occur.
I don't know.
Mayor, one of the things that we look to as a city staff when we're looking at recommending any support of affordable housing type programs or implementation of any types of programs, we've got a lot listed in our comprehensive plan. This is just a sampling list before you of ways to get to affordable housing. We certainly have a lot of naturally occurring affordable housing in Burnsville, as well as I guess contracted or established affordable housing. But with our comprehensive plan, we look to that for guidance and policy discussion. And the current policy says, for 4D specifically, that it can be with support, with a project with the CDA.
We have a
or-
policy in 4D, because didn't the legislature just adopt this, 2 years ago?
We don't have a specific policy
I
on
didn't think so.
4D, but our comprehensive plan does say that we can either do 4D in partnership with something with the CDA, or if we have a policy that speaks to it. And one of the areas that, if we do decide to create a policy, could be within a strategic plan area, for example, within Heart of the City or within Center Village, or if a project comes in and there's 3 bedrooms, because that is something that's needed.
I would much rather we have a policy and not just say it's in the comprehensive plan, because it's fairly new, 4D is fairly new, and I think we need to have a policy that speaks to it, rather than just say it's in our comp plan. Yeah.
May I
Yeah.
ask a follow-up question?
Vince?
It's not related to the question you just asked, but in our background, there's a piece here that says, once the tax credits are allocated, they are sold to an investor to generate equity for construction.
Yep.
The investor then becomes the limited partner in the project and uses the tax credits to receive a reduction in federal tax liability each year for 10 years.
Yep.
But Tony, did you say that there's an obligation for a 30-year term on those affordables?
For the affordable portion.
Correct, Mayor Couts, Councilmember Workman. What's been going on since that Tax Credit Act of 86 was put into place is entities have been trying to get more public purpose. So the program was set up as 10, 15 years of compliance. And what's happened since probably the mid-90s, those tax credits are so valuable, they've been flying off the shelf. And so public sector entities have been raising the public purpose price, if you will. So they will say, we want 20 years of affordability. We want 30 years of affordability. So what's been happening is, even though the federal law hasn't changed on the tax credits, the allocators in our QAPs and in our gap financing have started to and have established essentially a 30-year commitment. The other thing on these tax credits, that syndication. So Kathy, we get about $980,000 allocation. That's worth about $8.5 million of equity. So this is why these are so valuable.
Yeah.
They sell those on the secondary market. They syndicate those tax credits. And then you get $8 million of federal equity to put into the project. The quid pro quo is
The
you make those
investor
rents
does.
low, and you do, and you have to monitor this. You have to comply. You have to test the incomes of folks. So
The
that's
buyer of the credits
Right.
gets that value, not the city.
right.
Well, and the reason I asked that question is because I'm aware of other properties where maybe there was a 10-year obligation, those 10 years are up, and then those affordable units are no longer affordable.
Yep.
They took advantage of the tax credit while they could, and then poof.
Yep.
Right, that is, and what you've seen is people starting to rope down those compliance periods and extending them with use agreements and other sort of liens on the property.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So, council members, tonight is direction to staff on the tax credit. Do we support housing tax credit for this development? And I think the first thing we need to do is to have a policy around the 4D tax credit. Dan G.
Yes, I do support that. We have a housing crisis going on. I know we have a lot of housing that's affordable in the city right now, but it's also my belief with all the development that's been going on here and the remodeling of all these buildings, and I'm watching the rents in so many of these buildings going up. I'm not sure we've ever taken an inventory to see if some of those are still no housing. We probably should take a look at that. But the more important, urgent need is the housing crisis we're having in this country. We have families living in hotels right now because they can't get into housing. Our fire department, thanks to the Lions and that, are giving out cribs to the families living in these hotels. That's not a way to raise your family. That doesn't give them a good start in life. And
I
if
know
we can
that-
have some affordable housing, and the best part, this location is on a transportation line. It's on the 444, it's on the Orange Line. You can take transportation anywhere from this location, and that's what you really want to look for when you're looking about this type of housing.
Yeah.
So I support it, and I think
Yeah.
we should go ahead with it.
Yeah. And I, you know, when we all talk about, that there is a crisis in the country, I always look at Burnsville, you
Yep.
know, and we do have a lot of affordable housing.
Not as much as
And
we think.
But we're also building.
Yep.
So the thing is, it's there. But we need a 4D policy. We can't just talk about it on a comp plan. And then we need to even understand what that's going to look like for the center village.
But I think we can support this and develop the policy at the same time. We don't have to wait for the policy to do this.
Vince?
Will you come back to me?
Yeah, Kara already said she doesn't have any.
I support I support the project, but I'm also in agreement with you that I would rather have a policy in place so we're not shooting from the hip on a
And for
project
people
we
to
haven't seen
understand
before.
what this means.
So
the
I agree
4D.
with both of you.
Yeah,
And I love it when Tony comes in, because I always learn something from him.
Yeah, and all Tony is interested in is that, do we have the right zoning and are we supportive of the project? Yes. The other part is that this 4D tax credit is something new. That means we're going to give tax credit subsidy to this development. And, oh, by the way, the rest of Burnsville is going to pay for it.
No, because it still expands the tax base on what's there right now.
Yeah.
And that's been vacant for many, many, many
Yeah.
years, so
It
still increases our tax base.
It increases the
He
tax
wants
base.
to
but-
say
yeah.
something, and I would
Well, I
like
was
to
just gonna
know
say,
what
Mayor,
it is.
Mayor and council members, we just want to make sure that we don't tread into your lane.
Yeah.
You pull
He's
the
talking
permits,
about
you do
our
the
lane.
land use, right. And so it's really, what we're really looking for, not so much a yes, is more of, hey, you should know, we have a variance need that's going to take this much time, or we have
Yeah.
a site plan need. That's really
Yeah.
all we're looking for. We know that the state rule has
Yeah.
created some flux, but,
Yeah, so for you,
right.
what you need to know is that we've already looked at this, and it is in the heart of the city, and it is zoned mixed use. It's on a PUD. It just has to be changed from gas station to housing. But it is very much on the transit line and all of that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah, once you take the
Yeah.
PUD off, it's automatically a TOD.
exactly, so,
Yeah. Yeah.
again, this gets into if someone purchases the property and wants to develop the property, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a strong preference on that.
Yeah.
It's their deal, so.
And then they'll have to just come in, depending, because they're gonna have underground parking and all
Right.
of that, they'll have to go through our process. And part of it, it's gonna be administrative, like you've done administrative for the apartment building that's to the north of the Parkway and the senior housing.
That had a variance, but that was very nuanced.
Yeah, well, that was only on one piece,
Yeah.
Dan Kay?
Well, on the surface, any project with the CDA, I like right off the bat, because I think that organization in Dakota County is one of the shining stars of the county. There are a lot of people who fall into that housing need, whether it's highly affordable or even that workforce range. We talked about a project that was brought for, I believe it was on that church property at 5 and 42, and
Wolfpack.
and that would have been an ideal, I think. That was a workforce rent level, sort of, and I think we are in dire need of more of that. More 2 and 3 bedrooms, and so I hope that project will move forward and come back,
Yeah.
because I think that is a huge need. It's sort of in between the market rate and the 40 or 50-year-old older product that we have that is affordable. So my one question for this particular project is, because the word affordable has such a broad interpretation of meaning, can you give me a little better sense as to where the rents
20%.
would be for, because all I see is formulas, but it doesn't tell me, well, what would a person be paying rent at the low end, the middle end, and then those units that might be market, I guess, are not subsidized? Like, what would that be?
Mayor
Tony.
Councilmember Keeley, I'm going to lifeline on this one. So you have to, the developer is here with an application, so he can tell you, but Kathy is evaluating this one and another project,
Yeah.
so
Kathy, why don't you come to the table,
why don't you
please?
join us and tell us a little bit about what you've been told? Sorry, we're going to steal your lines. Yeah, I do think this is, you have to understand, we're wearing a couple of hats here.
Yeah.
Because we also develop
Yeah,
tax
I
credit
know.
housing, yeah.
Hey, I like your developments here in the city. I've told you that.
But I have to also keep a little bit of a Chinese wall between that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Welcome.
thank
to the
you,
table.
Mayor, council members. So this proposal is 43 units, and they are proposing to
have rent limits at the 50% of the area median income. So for example, so if the gross rents for, they propose some efficiency, so 0 bedrooms, those gross rents would cap out at
Are they
900.
doing 20% of the building is affordable, or the whole building?
The whole, 100% of the building will be affordable.
100% of the building
Yeah.
is affordable.
Yep, so all, 100% of those rents will be for, affordable at 50% of the area median income rent. So for efficiency, it's 932 right now, gross rents. And for they're proposing 30% of the units will be 3 bedrooms. And so, and those rents will max out at, now it's 1,480, so that range in there.
Between 9 and some change and about 480, about
Yeah, like
900 to
1,500.
1,500, and they all kind of get.
Yeah,
smashed
then
in there,
there's,
right?
yep, then there's a mix of ones and twos in there as well.
Yeah, because you manage your properties well.
Yeah.
We do have some who don't manage it well, the affordable part, and you know about that. And so I want to make sure that when we have an agreement with the developer, Regina, we're going to have management, so we don't have a lot of calls to a particular property like we have today. Right, Chief?
If I can comment, there won't be an agreement, assuming that this is
Well,
by right,
yeah.
building permit only.
Yeah, well, I think because when I get the emails and police and fire get the calls, it's a service area. And I'm hoping that you will be a lot better about these affordable units and take care of the residents that are there.
I can assure you that that will be the case. I actually sent Regina, sorry if you don't mind, I sent her a policy in another community where they would find properties that had excess of 3 nuisance calls in a given year. And we were supportive of that policy because, we wanted to be one of the good owners in town, so.
Can I finish the line I was going on?
Oh,
I have a follow-up, sorry. 9 to 1480, is that, you said that's the cap, so that would be the most a person would pay. What is the least, based on the formula, that a person would pay for that same range of studio versus?
Sure, well, those are, so, Mayor, council members, those are the maximum gross rents. So the developer most likely will charge those max rents, and then every year the rents get adjusted by incomes if they go up, and rents will be adjusted so they can increase those as they go.
So that's the minimum for each, the minimum for a studio is 900, the
Right,
minimum for 40.
yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought,
Sorry.
when you said it
We
was the
would
max
say-
of the cap, I
We'd
thought that
always
was the
look at
high
it the
end.
other way, so yeah. But,
Gotcha, okay. Those
But
are,
rents are, there's a utility allowance and there's a formula in there,
Sure.
so it adjusts.
and
But
just for edification, how would that compare to a market rate development that's new, because this would be brand new, obviously, that is in our market right now, let's say in Burnsville?
Good question. I am not familiar. I could speak with, Chris has owned some market rates. He might be able to.
Don't mind, I'll just.
Please.
So our proposed market rate just down the street, it's around 1,200 to 1,300 for a efficiency or studio, and then up to like 1,900, 2,000 for a 2-bedroom.
And 3 bedrooms are probably 23 or 2,400 maybe, if there is any.
We actually don't have any 3 bedrooms in the current one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 900 versus 12, it's, maybe a 30% rate reduction. 900 for an efficiency is, it's not, we're not giving it away. It's still a fairly high number for what is an efficiency apartment, right? I think there's great value in that 1,480 for the 3-bedroom. That's a fantastic reduction for a family with kids. And it sounds to me that's, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in the range of what would maybe be considered workforce as opposed to, highly subsidized?
Mayor Counts, Councilmember Keeley, yeah, our workforce family, we call it workforce family, is $830 for a two-bedroom, and that's a townhome product, and $920 for a three-bedroom. But we have an advantage that MWF doesn't have, which is we pay a pilot. So I pay about $1.3 million in property taxes a year at Dakota County Community Development. Burnsville gets about $250,000 in this town. You split it with everybody. But that's less than what he would pay in property taxes. So we take that advantage and push those rents down. Our cost of borrowing is cheaper, our equity is cheaper. So it's not quite an apples to apples, but that is one of the considerations. You know, we also require you have to accept a voucher. If we have a family, if their FMRs are in there, they accept a voucher. So you could have folks who make less than 50% AMI, and they'll have a voucher that helps them with that reduced rent as well.
I'd just like to say we do refer to this product type as workforce in our portfolio.
Okay,
So-
this is a little bit more like the one that was presented, that you remember that? Okay, thank you. Well, in that, I think because of the niche that it fills with the workforce, based on incomes and the rents, it's a brand-new product, and it's right on the transit route. I think it's I would support it. I think it's a
Well,
great
it's the same
product.
thing as Grand Marketplace. It's right on the transit line.
Yep.
And so it's there. So anyway, staff, you have consensus for tax credit related to this affordable project.
And would you like me to bring back a specific policy that goes a little deeper and give some criteria, or just as projects come in, check in?
Well, I think you need to have a policy in place, but this particular project, you have consensus to move forward with the tax credit. But I think we should have a policy, because we'll have others who would come before us, and if you have a policy, you have something to work with, right?
It certainly helps provide guidance to staff.
Until we create that policy, if another one shows up, just bring it before us.
Well, and like you said, we wouldn't even be discussing this, but for the change.
Yeah, if it weren't for that gas station PUD, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Okay. I think we have everything in place.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony, for coming, Kathy.
It's always fun to meet Kathy.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here. You have support for tax credit. Okay. Members of the council, I'm going to ask that we waive the reports that we usually give so that we can adjourn and move into the special work session. If that is okay, I will say that we adjourn the work session by unanimous consent. Yes. Okay? Very good, thank you. And then we will convene the special work session. Okay, got that? All right, very good.
Here.
Yeah, we're staying here.